What's going on, guys? Ben Brewster here, Tread Athletics, and today I'm going to be talking about the top 25 ways that you can keep throwing slow. So I say that a little bit sarcastically. I did have fun with this video, but I first got this idea from watching a video from Alex Hormozi, who's a YouTuber, entrepreneur, and does a lot of videos on kind of financial and entrepreneurship advice. And he talked about this idea of inversion thinking. And basically it's this idea of if we have a certain goal that we're trying to achieve, what we can do is we can basically flip it on its head and look at the opposite of what we would need to do to achieve that goal. And it's not only a fun way to examine a goal, but it just gives us a little bit of a different perspective and kind of highlights really what you do need to do to achieve the goal. So he did a video called Top 28 Ways to Stay Poor. I'm gonna do the top 25 ways to ensure that you keep throwing slow. Let's dive in. Tip number one is to constantly hop from program to program. Now, this will basically ensure that whatever program you do find and stumble across that happens to give you any sort of results, that those results won't last for too long. Super common that we see with a lot of the athletes we run into or come to us that are stuck in a rut. They're just constantly jumping here to there. They're downloading a free workout here, they're downloading a free throwing program there, they're trying something for a few months, then trying something else, then trying to throw like this MLB pitcher, then 2 weeks later they're trying to throw like this guy. If you're constantly bouncing around, that's a great way to ensure that you keep throwing slow. Number two is to rush back from injuries. So whatever small tweak you have, or if it's a major surgery, make sure to listen to your trainers and rush back as fast as you can, and maybe only take a few bullpens, and maybe only take 1 or 2 live BPs, and get right back into games as fast as you possibly can. This will ensure that you have as many compensations as you can in your delivery, and that your body isn't quite ready to actually achieve your previous level of performance. And so again, and just dive right back into competition. Nothing will go wrong, trust me. Number three would be to just focus on throwing strikes. Now, we all know that the very best Hall of Fame pitchers only threw strikes. They definitely never focused on, or definitely didn't have plus stuff as well. So don't focus at all on the stuff side of the equation. Don't focus at all on the velocity side of the equation. Just focus on throwing strikes. That'll definitely get you to your goals. Number four would be to never experiment with throwing beyond 60 to 120 feet. So definitely don't play around with the long toss routine. Definitely don't start to stretch it out to 200, 300 plus feet. Don't experiment with throwing it on an arc. Keep everything very confined, 60 feet, 120 feet max. Don't lengthen your arm out. Don't experiment with that whatsoever. As we know, all Hall of Fame pitchers just stuck within 60 to 120 feet. So if you do that, you can definitely ensure that you will maintain throwing slow. Tip number five would be to make sure that you finish in a good fielding position. So we all know that the final position you end in is the most important thing. It's not actually about how nasty of a pitch you deliver to the plate or your conviction with the pitch or actually the location or the movement or anything like that. It's about how you look when you finish the pitch. And if we can just purely focus all that energy intent on our fielding position and not just rotating violently and delivering a nasty pitch, that will definitely ensure that you continue throwing slow. Number six is to blindly follow everything that your coach says. Now, you're gonna have a ton of different coaches over the course of your career, and if you just put 100% of your trust and faith in whichever coach you happen to have right now, and you do everything they say to a T and never question it, never have a conversation, never give your own input, you can pretty much guarantee that the advice they give you is going to ensure that you're not searching for new things, and you're gonna be able to kind of maintain the status quo exactly where you are right now. So don't search for new perspectives. Blindly follow exactly what your coach says. Don't question him, and just put all your faith in what he tells you. Number seven is to avoid working on your biggest issues. So just continue putting all your effort into the 1 or 2 areas that are already your strengths, and don't try to uncover any of your weak links. Don't try to develop specific routines or plans or ways to target those weak limiting factors. Again, continue to double down on whatever your 1 or 2 strengths are and kind of push those things under the rug. Number eight would be to never develop a nutrition plan. So as long as you kind of continue to push that aside, push that under the rug, never track your macros, never track your calories, never evaluate your body composition goals, and never sit down and actually develop a plan, you can continue to kind of tell yourself that everything will just work itself out, and your body will make sure that it stays exactly where it is right now, and you can continue to throw slow. So definitely don't worry about gaining weight if you're undersized. Definitely don't worry about losing weight if you're a little bit overweight. We can make sure that you stay exactly where you are right now if you don't develop a nutrition plan. Number nine is to not pay attention to your training form. So as long as you continue to just lift as much weight as you possibly can through as short of a range of motion as possible, cheat your reps as much as you possibly can, beat up your joints as much as possible as well, you're gonna make sure that you minimize the transfer of all that effort you're putting in the weight room and continue to throw slow from that standpoint. So ego lift, try to impress everyone else on your team, and make sure that you don't actually get very much out of the lifts themselves, and you can ensure that you're going to continue to throw slow. Number 10 would be to never take recovery days. So as long as you're going max effort every single day, throwing, lifting, you're always in a fatigue state, your tissues are never given a chance to recover, and you're just really never taking a step back to do what you need to do to let your body actually adapt, you can really ensure that all that effort, all that hard work is really going nowhere and you can continue to throw slow and not get those adaptations that you want. Number 11 is to spend lots of time doing drills with balls that are way too heavy for you. So this might be throwing a ton of 4-pound balls where you're just shooting the elbow way up above the line of your shoulders and just tricep pushing that ball into ball release and just totally screwing up the ability of your arm to actually whip and lay back and spiral out into ball release. So that would be one great way to just reinforce and make sure that you continue to throw slow by screwing up the actual arm path and arm pattern. So doing a ton of really, really heavy ball weights to where you start to get those compensations will ensure that you keep throwing slow. Number 12 would be to not ever play around with different pitch grips. So let's say you naturally have some cut on your fastball, or maybe your thumb is kind of in a weird position, really tucked or really on the side of the ball, or your finger width is really wide. You definitely do not want to play around with different finger widths. You definitely don't want to play around with, hey, how can we get our spin efficiency to be a little bit higher? Definitely don't want to play around with thumb position. We want to make sure that if there's some sort of issue with our grip, we continue doing what we've always done because that's just the status quo, and don't experiment with different grips. Number 13 is to constantly change your mechanics. So the less rhyme or reason with all of these changes, the better. So if every time you get to the field, you try to throw like a different MLB player, or you're trying something different with your leg lift, or you're trying something different with your glove arm, or you're trying something different with your throwing arm, and there's no rhyme or reason, the better. And so this will ensure that when you do try something that actually does click, you're not going to stick for it long enough to actually get that velocity increase. So again, if something does work, make sure that you change it the next day, change it the following day, and you don't actually stick it through, and you can really make sure that you continue throwing slow. Number 14 is to never seek outside help or perspective. So as long as you never go outside your current like bubble of teammates, coaches, you can really make sure that you don't bring in new information, new tips, new things to try, and that if one of those things would potentially lead to you actually gaining velocity, we want to make sure we avoid those things at all costs. Keep it to the same perspective that we've been getting for the past couple of years. Number 15 is to focus on hitting static positions in your mechanics. So this will make sure that you are constantly obsessing about what one isolated part of your mechanics is doing versus kind of focusing on seamlessly transferring that energy through your entire body. Number 16 is to throw to a catcher or a partner as little as you possibly can. So this will make sure that all the patterns that you're practicing don't transfer to the game, and that maybe something does potentially click in a plyo session or in an indoor long toss session into a net. We want to really make sure that that doesn't actually transfer to the game and unfortunately, give you that velocity increase. So we can keep throwing slow as long as we never throw to a catcher and never actually throw to a human being. Number 17 is to make sure that you surround yourself with players who are all worse than you. This will make sure that you minimize the sense of urgency that you have and you maximize that kind of complacent perspective, just making sure that everyone who's around you is worse than you can feel confident, comfortable in yourself, and really never have anybody to push you to that next level. Number 18 is to avoid incorporating power or speed work into your training. So most likely you've gotten to this current point by doing a ton of strength-based training, and you might have seen some results from there. But again, we want to make sure that we don't evolve the training, don't begin to worry about explosiveness or power, or how fast can I apply that force that I've now developed. Let's just continue doing strength training and think that those diminishing returns will transfer to on-field performance. Number 19 is a slightly different approach from the last, which is to only do these filler or rehab or prehab type exercises. So if we can go through our entire training and never break a sweat, and it's all Turkish get-ups and single arm, rotator cuff movements, and we never actually exert ourselves or lift anything heavy or do anything with any sort of fatigue or real intent behind it, we can make sure that we never actually get any sorts of adaptations, and then it's all just kind of treating ourselves in this kind of clinical setting. So as long as we can make sure that we're pretty much always year-round running kind of a rehab-based program, we're never going to get any adaptations. We can make sure that we continue the status quo and stay right where we are. Number 20 is to blame your genetics. So as long as you kind of use your genetics as a scapegoat as to why you're not throwing harder, you can, again, be as complacent as possible and really not expend all the effort to uncover all the stones that you possibly can to learn what it might take to uncover your true potential. So as long as we just say that I'm completely capped because my genetics are crap, then we can make sure that we never continue to search and never continue to develop. Number 21 is to triple extend as hard as we can off the back leg. So we really want to make sure that we're putting as much ground force as possible into the rubber and pushing, extending, and jumping off the rubber as hard as possible. In doing so, we will minimize pelvic rotation, we'll minimize the ability to create separation, and we'll minimize that ability to ultimately transfer any sort of linear momentum into rotation and actually get that into the ball. So we want to really make sure we focus on lots of drills, lots of medicine ball stuff where it's just pushing and extending as hard as we can so that none of that actually makes its way into the ball. Number 22 is to avoid doing mobility work on your problem areas. So we want to make sure that, let's say you have tight pecs or tight lats, we avoid doing anything to potentially open up those ranges of motion because we don't want to risk potentially throwing harder. We want to make sure that we continue to throw slow. As much as we can avoid doing any sort of mobility work for any sort of problem area, we can continue to have compensation through our delivery. We can continue to negatively affect the positions that we get into, the sequencing, and we can make sure that we stay exactly where we are right now. Number 23 is to try to throw like somebody who has a completely different body type than you. So let's say you're 5'7". We should definitely use someone like Chris Sale or Randy Johnson as a mechanical comp and try to emulate exactly how they move and exactly what they do. Or maybe it's someone who's a little bit shorter and you're kind of a taller stature, or someone who's extremely mobile and you're a little bit of a tighter mover. We want to make sure that we comp and model ourselves after successful pitchers who have completely different levers, completely different mobility from us. This will make sure that our body continually fights us every step of the way and that we really struggle to get into some of these positions and emulate some of these patterns. So that would be my next tip, is pick really far off, obscure comps who look nothing like you and have very different body types from what you currently have. Number 24 is to rotate the pelvis and trunk together. This will make sure that we limit any sort of natural torque generation or hip-shoulder separation that we might potentially achieve. Again, that would be bad because we want to make sure we avoid velocity gain as much as possible. So if we can not segment our hips from our shoulders and we can rotate everything as one unit, that'll make sure that we limit separation and we limit velocity from that standpoint as well. So don't do anything that would encourage separation. Don't do anything that would encourage the hips to get out in front of the shoulders and the shoulders to stay back. And then therefore we can, again, make sure that we continue to throw slow. Number 25 is to ignore your sleep quality. So we really want to make sure, if you are trying to throw slow, that all the training, all the throwing that you're doing, that we're not optimally recovering from that, so that we can keep throwing slow. So because sleep is where most of this recovery happens, if we can ignore our sleep quality, we can actually maximize the chance that we continue to throw slow. So continue drinking caffeine late in the day, continue having an irregular sleep schedule, continue staying up late on the weekends and sleeping in super late. This will all ensure that we continue to not recover as well as we possibly could and continue to throw slow moving forward. Guys, I know this list was a little bit obvious for some of them, a little bit of a review, but my general point here was that there's a lot of different factors that go into throwing hard, or on the flip side, throwing slow. So maybe 23 out of 25 here were total review, total obvious, like super obvious. You didn't have to question them. You're 100% agree, but maybe one or two of these things got you thinking and you're like, maybe that is something that I could take a little bit of a deeper look at. It's something I'm maybe not paying as much attention to as I might need to. These are not all absolutes. I'll just throw that out there. So there are times when long toss is beneficial. There are times when, throwing at 60 feet is what works best for a certain guy. There are times when, some heavier ball work actually can be beneficial. But by and large, these are just some general trends that we've observed with our athletes that hold them back from uncovering what they truly could be doing, at least from a velocity standpoint. Obviously, there's a performance side of the equation and a velocity side of the equation, and those two things really are interlinked. What we do at Tread is really not purely focused on velocity. That's just one piece of the equation, but hopefully this got you guys thinking. If you were entertained by this video, if you learned something, drop a comment down below. Give me any suggestions that you have for future content ideas, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.